Hello, everyone. Welcome to the session. I'm going to give it another minute before we get started here. Okay, Sarah, are you ready for me to get us going?
Ready to go. Thank
Wonderful. Well, welcome to the session, Sustaining LGBTQ plus Success with Optimism, Resilience, and Grit. We are with Sarah Scala, who is a sought-after speaker supporting unique needs and challenges within the LGBTQ plus community. She is an expert on maximizing performance through optimism, resilience, and grit, and building emotional intelligence for individuals and organizations. Sarah holds a master's degree in organization development and adult education and is an ICF certified executive coach. She lives with her partner, Holly, in Boston, Massachusetts. And Sarah, I'm going to turn it over to you. You are muted, Sarah.
Hi. Is that working? Perfect. Well, good afternoon, good morning, and good evening. Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Sarah, and it's an honor to be having this opportunity to lead this workshop without an equal. Before we dive too far into it, just a little bit about who I am and what I do. I coach LGBTQ leaders. I work with LGBTQ employee resource groups, and I've had the honor of supporting some of these amazing organizations. As people are joining, there is a handout for today's workshop. If you go to the Pathable page under Files, you're going to want to open that PDF handout out and equal for today's workshop. So I want to pause for 30 seconds while people can go ahead and grab a copy of today's handout. Ten more seconds. Three, two, one. The good news is that handout will be available after the session as well. So let's get started. Wanted to start this workshop by sharing a reference or a resource where I started learning about optimism, resilience, and grit over 10 years ago. The book is called Flourish. It's by Dr. Martin Seligman. Martin Seligman is at the University of Pennsylvania, and he is known as the founder of positive psychology. I'll throw a quick link in the chat. I know sometimes when people attend workshops, they always like to know what's that book, who's that author that the speaker is referencing. So the book is Flourish by Dr. Seligman. So let's jump into optimism. Before we dig too far into positive psychology, LGBTQ at work today, McKinsey did a study just last June, and they found that our biggest challenges as LGBTQ folks at work are coming out, are discrimination, microaggressions, and isolation. A little bit of my background. My name is Sarah Scala. My pronouns are she, her, hers. Last night I was at an LGBTQ event and a woman introduced herself and she said her pronouns were she, her, beautiful. So I thought that was pretty cool. But and something I certainly might use in future speaking events. I identify as being bisexual, and I live with my partner Holly, also a woman in Boston. So these are some of the challenges, ladies and gentlemen, that LGBTQ folks are facing at work today. And so as we look at these challenges and we look at making our organizations more inclusive or building our sense of resilience and grit for going to work every day, being aware of these challenges and knowing that you're not alone with these challenges, I think is pretty important. So as we talk about optimism is our stable belief that generally things are going to turn out and be okay. Now, we're not talking when I do this workshop about toxic positivity. The positivity competencies that I'm sharing with you today, optimism, resilience, and grit, are all skills that can be built and strengthened at any age. They're that stable belief. And it says this on the top of your handout first page as well. So let's look at some of the habits of optimists. These have been defined as 10 of the habits, understanding again that our past isn't necessarily our blueprint for the future. People who have a high level of optimism tend to forgive. They're better listeners. They exercise more. They smile more. They frown less. They do have gratitude. They don't blame as much, and they're more of positive forward thinkers. Now, as I share this list of 10 habits with you, some of you may think, well, that's nice. That's all soft and fuzzy interpersonal stuff. But how does that affect a bottom line of my business or the business that I work for? I have to tell you, it has a pretty significant impact. And I'm going to share that in just a few moments. So we were going to do breakout sessions. However, I set this workshop up as a webinar versus a meeting, which was my fault. So we are not able to do breakout rooms today. And these questions were designed for you to discuss with partners. However, we do have a poll. So the first question in the, what's it called? In the, Pathable system, there's a tab that says polls. Go ahead and click on the first poll in Pathables, which asks how optimistic you are right now. How optimistic do you feel that if there were issues impacting your LGBT community at work, that they would be addressed adequately? So in the Pathables website, click on the polls button, and I would love to hear from you. And this is the first poll. So let's see everyone's vote. How optimistic are you? Let's see. Wow, we're getting a lot of votes. Cool. I'll wait maybe 10 more seconds. So on my screen, I say 34% of you, and we have about a few more than 100 people in the group, 34% feel like a high level of optimism that it will be managed appropriately. 55% are saying medium, and then 11% are saying low. Thanks so much for voting on this one. I really appreciate it. So let's go back to the second question. And I'd love for folks to share their answers to question 2. How do you currently keep yourself optimistic at work or in life? So if you can go ahead and put in the chat box, I'd love to get your ideas. Bruno, I hope you were able to find the poll. Jill, celebrate small things, listening to your favorite music, thinking about where you're coming from, taking naps, thumbs up for taking naps for sure, yoga, journaling, hiking, write down 3 good things that happen every day. Rebecca, I do that as well. I have a gratitude journal. Nice. Dance with your jazz hands, exercise, hanging with the dog, taking long walks. I'm getting optimistic and excited just reading these great responses, meditation, gratitude. Awesome. Remember, things are going well. Naturally optimistic, helping others, prayer and singing. Wow, there's so many simple ways that we can practice optimism. One thing that I do, taking PTO, paid time off. Things that I do to practice optimism, I exercise. I go for a run or I ride my bike. I got a new e-bike last month and that thing just flies. I don't know how I can be unhappy riding that. Be nice and kind to others. Thank you, Bruno. Yep. How do you keep yourself optimistic? Taking vacation. Thank you, Joseph. I'm getting some great responses coming into the chat. I really appreciate everyone's great participation. Nice. Awesome. All right. In the groups, you are supposed to have the opportunity to discuss these 10 habits and see which ones you already have. Since we're not in breakouts, I'd love in the chat for folks to throw down which of these 10 habits do you feel like you have already? I know for me, I try really hard every day to smile more and forgive. I don't want to carry baggage or anger in my body. So focus on what's great. Gratitude. Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. Eric, forgiving is a big one. Yeah, Devin, sharing your stories. Smile a lot. Vitamin D, getting some sunshine. Sure, smiling. Smiling. Smiling at people that pass by. Michelle, thanks so much. Lots of smiles. I wish I could see your smiles today. Empathy, jazz hands, celebrating. Yep, journaling. Awesome. What else are people doing? I really appreciate your positivity. Yeah, Rebecca, positive forward thinking. Smiles are addictive. Sure thing, Eric. Tell bad dad jokes. Thank you, Joseph. Bad dad jokes. Yep. Awesome. Cool. Great job on the participation front. Doing an act of kindness. Yeah. Very cool. All right. Act of kindness for a stranger as well. Yep. Thanks for doing that. So I wanted to share with you the bottom line benefits, how optimism can affect your bottom line as the CEO of you, as the boss of yourself, as well as employees and organizations. And this research comes from, I believe this comes from the APA, American Psychological Association. These are the bottom line results. So optimists feel happy and they are healthier. We know that, but they're more likely to live to 100 years old. They take fewer sick days. They're less prone to freaking out at work. They're happier at work. For those of you who are dating, whether you're in a committed relationship, monogamous, not monogamous, or whether you're exploring dating right now, you make a better date. So maybe you've been in a long-term relationship, you're still going to make a better date to go out with, which that always helps. People who have a high level of optimism also get more promotions and job offers. So that's important for us all as LGBTQIA people or allies. Those who have more optimism get more job offers and promotions. So as we look at future planning, workforce planning for our organization, who's going to take different roles, optimism is a pretty big piece of the puzzle. Optimists are also better at bouncing back and they make better athletes. If you are really curious about how optimistic are you really, and you would like to do a pulse check, good news. On the last page of the handout, as well as on this slide, I share that the University of Pennsylvania, under Dr. Seligman, has built an assessment center that is completely free. And in this assessment center, you log in, you set up a free account, and you can take the optimism test to see how optimistic are you. So that's going to be homework assignment number 1 for everybody, is to go to that link and take the optimistic test, maybe sometime over the weekend. I often do this workshop for leaders, for associations, and most of the time I suggest that they share this link with their peers or their employees so that they can have a conversation about optimism. What might be a barrier to them being more optimistic at work, and how each member of the team can support each other. The really good news about optimism and resilience and grit, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone, non-binary folks as well, is that optimism can be built at any age. So that's pretty exciting. Often I'll do the workshop, people will go home, do the quick assessment. I think it will take you 3 or 5 minutes. Do some work on building your level of optimism, which, how do you build optimism? On that first list, the characteristics of optimists, you can go ahead and try to work on some of those. Now, I'm not saying that you should be working on smiling and going outside and getting some sun all at the same time. Maybe pick 1 or 2, but you can work on this. And then in a few weeks, after you've practiced, you can go ahead and take the optimist test again to see how much has your optimism built or improved. Joseph Covey, thanks so much for throwing the link in the chat for that optimism test. I'm going to ask that you not take it right now because we still have to talk about resilience and grit. So Joseph Covey, thanks so much. So we did our poll. Let's move into resilience. So with resilience is our ability to withstand strong or stress or catastrophe. It's our ability to bounce back. Now, we're not going to bounce back exactly where we left from, but it's our ability to come back to a place of possibility. That is resilience. And I love Tigger, so it's there. I'm seeing some comments in the chat. Just want to address those before we move over. It's critical to acknowledge the way that life experiences and inequalities influence how easy or challenging it can be to increase optimism. Brandy, thanks so much for sharing that. And Peter has said he finds optimism grow when you have a small success. Yeah, it's a ripple effect, Peter. Thanks so much for being here, by the way. It's a ripple effect. The more optimism we have, the more optimism will grow, but also people around us will feel more optimistic. If you have someone on your team or in your department or even in your home that isn't very optimistic, that can really have a direct impact on you, how you see work and how you see life. So let's dig into resilience. So 10 to 20% of employees have difficulty getting back to normal after a stressful event. Holy cow, the COVID-19 pandemic was a major stressful event, huge. And so if you look at this research and we're saying 10 to 20% can't get back to normal, that's going to have a huge impact on the workforce. An employee's lack of resilience, maybe they don't have a lot or haven't worked on building the competency of resilience. But if they have a lack of resilience, it likely impacts not only their performance, but the performance of members of the team, their colleagues and their leaders. So we may look at ourselves and say, man, I am super resilient. All is good. And all is great until you might come in touch with another person who may not have that level of resilience. So again, as I do this workshop, it's not just for those who are participating today, it's for those who are back at your companies when you go back to share about optimism and about resilience. So we have another poll. Let's go back into the Pathables system. I would love to get a pulse check on our group right now. How resilient are you feeling right now? I'm going to vote, and I'd love to see what you all are feeling. All right, I put in an answer and my screen saying an answer is required. I'm not sure why. And we have a lot of comments coming in. Some folks are struggling with anxiety and OCD, so optimism takes some work. And we're dealing with post-pandemic syndrome. Joseph, thank you. Well, some have rejected, Chris says, well, some have rejected them from coming out. It hurts. So many have embraced. That doesn't mean it's easy street, but they have more confidence. Yep. Rebecca said, when less optimistic at work, trying to think of ways to improve the environment, constantly talking to the boss about areas that they have concern. Yep. Using your story, Joseph, thank you, about how COVID impacted real people, keeping it real. Chris is saying low, feels like COVID will be around forever. Yep. I know. We're not out of the swamp yet with COVID. Were folks able to vote on the poll, or did that not work? I'm unable to see the results. Poll worked. Excellent. Rebecca, is it possible for you to share the, oh, thank you. All right, so we have 41% saying they have a high level of resilience, 46% are medium, and 13% are feeling low. All right, I really appreciate everyone participating in the poll. It just helps me, and I think it helps the rest of the group, saying, hey, we're at the last day of Out and Equal. Where are we all feeling? Eric says, optimism that we as humans will get through this. We need to get back to loving everyone and not judging them. Excellent. I'm really loving the dialogue in the chat. This has just been exceptional. Thanks so much, everybody, for your continued participation. Cool. It makes it much more fun for me as your facilitator. So I wanted to share with you 10 proven ways to build your resilience. And I believe this is on the handout. I think it's on page 2 of your handout. 10 ways to build resilience. And this is coming from the experts, the APA, the Association of the American Psychology Association. Making connections, seeing crises avoid looking at crises as the end of it, accept change that's a part of our life. Anytime we can take a step towards a goal, making decisive action, we don't have control over the world or our workplace, or even sometimes our teams that we work on. But when I'm feeling a little down, I'll often ask myself, what's one thing I can do, one step I can take, something I have control over? Oftentimes it's embedding some of those ways to build optimism. Am I getting enough rest? Have I practiced mindfulness? Did I eat a healthy lunch? Which, thanks to my partner, she just made me a quesadilla today, right before I went live with you. Look for opportunities for self-discovery. Keep things in perspective. And again, take care of you. I am really glad that the pandemic has brought out the importance and the need for self-care, even more. I have some comments coming in. There's zero work-life balance right now. Hard to be optimistic. Yeah. Yep. I can absolutely agree. Joseph said he's feeling inspired, in charge. There's even more chat on the Pathable platform. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to watch both plus the chat box. Let me see if, because I'm high tech here with 3 screens, let me see if I can see the chat on the Pathable. Thank you for sharing that with me too. Whew, so much to watch. If you see me looking left to right, folks, it's simply because I have 3 screens for this exact reason. Wow, so many great comments. Really need to focus on all these tips. Brian says, no matter how bad anyone has it, there's always others that have it worse. Brian, thank you for sharing that. And Joseph, thanks for the vote of confidence that that you're enjoying this workshop. Excellent. So taking care of ourselves, maintaining that healthful outlook, keeping things in perspective too, right? When I'm really down, and I have a high level of resilience most of the time, but everyone has an off day, I'll remind myself, well, I woke up in a warm house, I have food and water, the electricity is working, and some point in the day I can have a hot bubble bath. And really, at the end of the day, there are a lot of folks that may not even have those amenities and resources. So these are 10 ways to build resilience. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not suggesting you do all 10 tomorrow or right after our workshop. Pick one, maybe two. If resilience is an area that you feel like, boy, I want to build this and be stronger, pick one or two on the list and put it into practice. Take care of yourself, make a decisive action, look at your mindset or your viewpoint. All right. Need to ensure we have a balance of perspective. Megan, thanks for sharing this. Chris says, true, need to feel bad sometime, but know when not to wallow in it for too long. Yep. And I'm not saying, that the world is perfect. I don't ever suggest that we sugarcoat everything. I think that's more toxic positivity that we've been hearing so much about. The good news about optimism, resilience, and grit, though, is that at any age, we can focus on these competencies and they can be strengthened. They can be strengthened. All right. So I have some additional tips for building resilience. And before we get to this, Joseph, you are awesome for putting these links right in the chat box. I can't thank you enough. Somebody has said in the chat, I found that caring for others is an important part of self-care, especially during these difficult times. Yes, absolutely. I used to spend all of my time on Cape Cod. Now I just spend part-time on Cape Cod in Massachusetts. And I would volunteer with a group called Falmouth Eats Together. And every Thursday, we would volunteer and serve dinners to those in need. So especially if I was having a rough day or a cloudy day, boy, being able to give back and help someone else that maybe wasn't as fortunate as I am was a huge boost in my resilience, in my optimism, and in my positivity. Joseph, if Cape Cod is on your bucket list, I highly suggest you come visit because it's a beautiful place. Alex, I love P-Town as well. Excellent. Awesome. So I did want to share with you, if that list of 10 seems overwhelming or maybe too long to reference or remember, Dr. Martin Seligman, who I shared about him at the beginning, the founder of positive psychology, University of Pennsylvania, came out with this model called PERMA. P-E-R-M-A. PERMA stands for positive emotion, engagement, meaning, positive relationship, and accomplishments. So if you are feeling like you could use a boost in your resilience, just having this little picture, and if you Google Seligman PERMA, you can get this same picture. I may have put it on your handout as well. I can't remember. It's a good reminder of ways that you can trigger yourself to become more resilient or to move back into a place of resilience. Joseph, thanks so much. Joseph says this picture is on the handout. I have many clients and executives that have this little PERMA picture like hanging up right on the corner of their monitor, just as a constant reminder. We're not going to be always happy. Life's going to happen. We're going to have pandemics. There's going to be, losses in our lives, changes in our careers. But having this model, PERMA, is really helpful. So how might you use this model? The model, you can use it in a couple ways as a constant reminder to yourself. So I use it and I think about, what am I working on right now that has meaning? I'll tell you, folks, right now, I am leading a workshop on positive psychology, optimism, resilience, and grit for my LGBTQIA plus friends and allies in the world's largest global LGBT conference. So that is what I'm doing right this minute that has meaning. So if I was feeling down, I could remind myself of this amazing opportunity that I'm incredibly thankful for. If you have members of your family or members of your team, if you have direct reports, this is a great model. Once you share it with them, you can simply ask them a question. What achievement are you working on that you're proud of? Or you could ask them, tell me about a positive relationship that's been really supportive for you. Or you could ask them, tell me what seems to bring out positive emotions for you. What are you working on at work or not that is bringing you joy? So PERMA is a really good reminder for all of us, whether we're an employee, whether we're a leader, whether we're an ally, to help others to start to strengthen their resilience. All right, this is fun. I'm having a blast. I love everything that's happening in the chat as well. Thank you so much. Brian had a resilient tip. Do something that gives you a sense of accomplishment and purpose every day. We can't change the past. We can remain hopeful in the future. Brian, thanks so much. Engage with others, service for an organization. Rotary is awesome. That's what Joseph has to say. Very cool. So we're going to move to a favorite competency of mine, which is grit. Grit is defined by Dr. Angela Duckworth as passion and perseverance for long-term goals. Grit. Grit is a pretty cool competency. I have a great quick story to share with you folks. The research from grit and building grit and helping those develop the competency of grit has been pretty strong. In Dr. Seligman's book, Flourish, which I shared earlier in our workshop, he details how the United States military, I believe it was specifically the Army, had Dr. Seligman do a 10-year study. 10 years, that's a long time, about what makes an exceptional performer in the military. And they studied this under Dr. Seligman's leadership for 10 years. And guess what they found out? It wasn't muscles or self-confidence or academic excellence. It was grit. Those folks who had a very high level of grit were the best performing members of our military. That study was done 15 or 20 years ago. Applying it to our world today, many public schools, elementary schools in the United States of America are embedding curriculum in grit to be teaching 5, 6, and 7-year-olds at their very, very young age how they can become gritty people. Because we know that if that is the differentiator of excellence, of exceptional performance, why not start teaching people when they're very, very young? So from the United States military all the way down to kids in kindergarten and in first grade. And when I learned about that, I was really, really excited. So I want to share with you some of the characteristics of those that have a high level of grit. So one is courage. If you're going to stick to a long-term goal with passion and with perseverance, you're going to have some courage, because there's going to be some bumps in the road, some up and down, some, not every day is perfect or sunny. So having some courage is pretty important. Then there's conscientiousness. This is an interesting one. Being achievement-oriented instead of dependable. And I often get a lot of questions about this. People be raising their hand like, what do you mean? Are we not supposed to be dependable? I thought dependable is what companies expect of their employees. I'm not saying do not be dependable. What I'm simply saying here, and based on the research, is showing that if I have to make a choice to be dependable on a project today or really be focused on long-term achievement orientation, Those with a high level of grit pick achievement orientation every day. Now, I'm not saying we do not need employees and members of our teams or members of our family that are dependable. What I am saying is those with a high level of grit are going to pick the long-term achievement over the day-to-day tasks. They're also focused on long-term goals, and they have endurance. Interesting piece about resilience, one of the characteristics is that they have optimism, confidence, and creativity. That's why when I do this workshop, I talk about optimism first, then resilience, then grit, because optimism builds resilience, and resilience and optimism are characteristics of grit. And the last characteristic that I'd love to share with you is excellence versus perfection. I always get questions about this. Well, what do you mean? Aren't we supposed to try to be perfect? My company expects us to do a really good job. Why wouldn't we always pick perfection? Well, perfection is not possible. I think most of us know that. And I'm not saying slack off and do a bad job, but I'm saying the person with grit is really striving for long-term excellence versus day-to-day perfection. Justin's asking, do we have data on how developing characteristics may be different for neurodiverse folks? Justin, that is an excellent question. And although I work in the space of positive psychology, I do a lot of coaching and I know how it impacts the brain, I don't have the data right this moment to share in terms of how it will impact the neurodiverse folks. Definitely something for me to write down and something for me to learn, Justin. So I really appreciate you asking the question, and I don't know the answer. And I'm okay with not knowing the answer because we cannot know everything and we cannot be perfect. So let me write this down. Neurodiverse folks and grit. Megan, thank you so much. Maybe part 2 for next year. Humility is an admirable virtue. Oh, thank you, Chris. Thank you so much. And I did want to go back. Somebody said in the comments a few moments ago, at work, I try to focus on value over success metrics. I like to tell my employees how valuable their actions and behavior are as much as I can, not just what's on the monthly scorecard. Yeah, excellent. Justin said, as a person with ADHD, that follow through is an area of challenge and growth. Justin, I really appreciate you being so honest and so vulnerable in the chat. And you have a lot of people in the chat already who are totally agreeing with you and are with you. This is great. It's interesting how Out and Equal seems to build a whole community in these workshops, even just in the chat. I really appreciate everyone's kindness. All right. So let's take a look at some of these questions now. I know I had questions on resilience. That was really for partner conversation. So they may be good questions for you to talk with people you work with or new friends that you have made, the resilience questions. But I did have a couple of questions about grit, and I'm on page 2 of our handout here, folks. Question 1, how gritty are you? And I don't have a poll for this one. So I'd love for you to put in the chat box. 3 would be super gritty, 2 would be medium, and 1 would be not much. Can everybody put in the chat box? Where are you? And just be honest. Very gritty. Joseph, thank you. Yep, Michelle said 1. Wow. Awesome. 1.25. Okay. So we have a lot of diversity in our level of grit. Definitely. I have some awesome. So we are all over the map here today with this. So let's just see one little thing. So on your handout, there's 4 ways to improve grit. Before we get into this, or actually before we get to that, Question 3 on your hand that I think is a good one. How can your community could be your out and equal community, could be your family, could be your community at work or community in your employee resource group. How can your community support you in building grit? How can your community, yeah, Chris, giving you permission to fail. Yep. Go ahead and write your response to that question. Question 3 on page 2 in the chat box. Supporting you when you ask for it. Yeah, Neil, thank you. Maida said, definitely struggle with grit. The follow through is the hardest. Yeah, yep. Joseph said, we are only human. Help with accountability, given support. What else? Reconnecting with me when I fall away. ADHD means out of sight, out of mind. I don't love you less. Thank you, Craig, for sharing that. Yep. Push beyond your comfort level. Face more challenge and hard checking you when you're down to refocus. Allowing open discussion on concern and not being punished for saying what you think, right? We need to be real. I've been doing a lot of workshops this year, especially on psychological safety at work. And Amy Edmondson's research out of Harvard. And the workshops are fabulous. And people are realizing we have to make it safe for everybody. Safe in terms of diversity in ideas, diversity in background, in gender, in orientation, in race, in creed, because all the research is showing that that's the only safe way for people to innovate, to take risks, to share new ideas. We wouldn't have a lot of these things that we have in the world today, our technological advances, our vaccine for COVID, all of these pharmaceutical advancements, if it wasn't safe to take risks, and realizing that sometimes we're going to fail, we're going to mess up sometimes. Eric says, celebrating big wins, little wins, and the things that didn't work out. Yep. Being okay when people say no. Awesome. Boy, awesome. Also, proactive recognition. Let's see, cheering each other on. I love this. I'm having a blast. I hope you all are too. So I did want to share, well, before we get to this slide, I'll just go in this one. There's 4 simple ways to build grit. As overwhelming as it may feel, thinking about, wow, passion, perseverance, the United States military, 5-year-olds, how do I even build these skills in grit? And this is on page 2. Be meaningfully interested. Ladies and gentlemen, and all folks, you are not going to want to have grit, passion, and perseverance for something that you hate. I do not have grit for cleaning the bathroom or doing dishes. Do I have to do those? Of course. Am I gritty about them? Is it something I want to invest 10,000 hours in? Absolutely not. There's even some parts of my work that I may not be gritty around. But overall, looking at how to build your level of grit, focus first on something that you're truly interested in. The next way, cultivating a growth mindset. So for those who aren't familiar, a growth mindset, someone who has a growth mindset, looks at learning as something that's lifelong, that we're always going to have to evolve and keep learning or relearning or changing new things just to stay successful and current. On the other hand, those folks that have a fixed mindset pretty much says, well, I graduated high school or college or PhD or whatever, and that's it, I'm all done. So having that growth mindset is needed for grit because it's really long-term, passion and perseverance. The third way is to invest in deliberate practice. Whether you want to be gritty about playing the piano or leading your employee resource group or being an engineer or a public speaker. We don't get great at any of these skills or behaviors overnight. And so really deliberately investing in practicing. For me, things I'm working on developing, I have them scheduled on my calendar every week as a constant reminder of the need to practice. And the last one, asking for support. We can't be gritty and conquer the world's challenges or challenges at work if we can't get some help. So thinking about who might be able to support you in particular skills, behaviors, tasks, and in parts of your life. Personally, I have 8 mentors and a coach and a therapist. And that's my entire support system, as well as communities of other coaches, of other leadership development folks, consultants. And so Taylor says support networks are key. We need to try and be that support for others as well. Yeah, Joseph says, one of my strongest skills is learning. It's your superpower. Craig says, my husband is great at celebrating the non-linear thinking. Great. This is awesome. Yeah, so those are some of the ways that will allow you to strengthen your grit. Good news, ladies and gentlemen, and folks, for those and allies and everybody, dogs, cats, rabbits, everybody. We can test our grit by using that same assessment that the University of Pennsylvania has set up. So they have a grit test as well as the optimism test, all free. And you can go in, take the grit test later today, see how you're doing, look at ways that you want to focus on building. And again, don't do all 4 of these ideas at once. Asking for support, being meaningfully interested, cultivating a growth mindset, investing in deliberate practice. Pick one thing to be gritty at and one way to do it. But then in a month or 2 after you've been practicing, go back to the University of Pennsylvania's assessment website and take a pulse check. Where are you right now? Somebody said, Joseph said, love the quote on the handout. Gritty individuals approach the journey to mastery like a marathon and not like a sprint. And this fuels their stamina, their practice, their targets, or talents, over and over and over again. Joseph, thanks so much for sharing that. Awesome. So let's talk about life at work today from that McKinsey study. So we started this workshop talking about some obstacles or some challenges that we have as LGBTQIA plus people. And those were coming out, discrimination, microaggression, and isolation. There are defined ways that McKinsey is suggesting, and this is just last summer, that we can make our workplace more friendly, whether we're a member of the employee resource group, whether we're still in the closet, whether we are an ally, whether we have children or family members who are LGBTQIA plus. So these are the ways. They're saying, don't stumble into microaggressions. Don't stumble into microaggressions. Sometimes I think people are microaggressive and don't realize it. So become familiar with what microaggression is, and look for ways that you can avoid it. For me, in the past, it's been people saying, oh, you're bi, so that just means you haven't made up your mind. It's not a complete kick in the head, but it sure doesn't feel good. And LGBTQIA plus people have had to historically deal with small microaggressions like that through a lot of our history. So let's not stumble on microaggressions. Set a meaningful public example, whether that means opening your meetings and giving your pronouns, adding a pronoun to your signatures, or standing up for people who might be being bullied in your workplace. Educate your team. Strengthen your pipeline. Sustain supporting networks. We've talked a lot in this workshop about community. And strengthen your policies at work. Are they discriminatory? Are they equal? What are we doing in our workplace that supports trans folks who may be needing different medical resources than folks who are not trans? all of these things. Do folks have access to health insurance or health resources, whether they're married, whether they're in domestic partnerships? So I'm getting a lot of comments in the chat box here. So strengthen the policies, sustain the network, strengthen your pipeline, educate your team, set a meaningful example, and don't stumble into microaggressions. Chris said on day 3, I was asked if I had a girlfriend. So I had to come out earlier than I wanted to by saying I had a boyfriend. Told her I knew she meant well, but it put me in a tough spot, and she took it well. Chris, well done for being brave, because I know that isn't easy at all. When I'm in business meetings, I run a consulting practice that works with many organizations. It's still very common for leaders to say, oh, can you bring your husband to dinner? Well, I don't have a husband. I don't have a boyfriend. I have a partner. But again, putting me in a position where I need to come out instead of saying, hey, can your partner join us for dinner? Brandy said, not a complete kick in the head, but sure doesn't feel good. That's one of the best ways I've ever heard microaggressions explained. Brandy, thanks so much. We only have about 9 minutes left. Chris has said a coworker meant no harm, but it's easy to assume everyone's straight. Exactly. I think my hope is that the world is changing in that we don't necessarily make those assumptions all the time. Corey says he wants more. Craig says, good to discourage social assumption norms, not only gender of partner, but also partner and family status. Joseph said, where did the time go? We know that coming out never ends and it is constant. Thank you, Alex. So I have a couple more things to share. I'd love for you folks, I'm going to open the floor for questions. And if you have a question, I'd love to have it in the chat box. Do me a favor and write the word question in caps and then write your question. That way, myself and Rebecca will be able to see it really quickly. So I'd love for you to write in the chat box what you appreciated or what stood out for you out of our workshop today. Sustaining LGBTQIA success with optimism, resilience, and grit. So if there are questions, I'd love to take them. And I'd love to know what your nugget was in this last hour, what you appreciated, or what stood out. If you can throw those in the chat box, that would be wonderful. Really wonderful. All right. How do we get more information about this? That is a great question, Cambria Ruida. I'm going to share 2 resources for you in just a few minutes, just in like the concrete tools. Megan liked the tangible steps. Craig said the distinction between excellence versus perfection, value or value-oriented as a mantra, awesome superpowers, optimism, resilience, and grit. Thank you. Thank you. The time for solidarity with others like you. Yeah. Remind me that you got this. Yeah, you got this, Slusser. Question, what is the best tip who is new to this concept? So good news, I have a blog that I write every week. And so a number of the blogs that I write are about these exact pieces, optimism, resilience, and grit. Also, Martin Seligman's book on flourishing. Chris had a question. I've been leading our company's ERG and still haven't met another transgender person. I'm trying to move the transgender and gender non-conforming forward and making tons of progress, but a lot of time I feel awkward and alone, even with the support. Doesn't really count for the subject, but just wanted to share. Chris, thanks so much for sharing that. So you haven't met anyone who is trans in your employee resource group. Does anyone have any tips for Chris? If you feel like, I'm sure, Chris, you probably aren't the only trans person at work. You simply may be the only trans person who is out. Does anyone have any tips for Chris? Go ahead and throw those in the chat box as well. I think, from my perspective, Chris, as the expert on optimism, resilience, and grit, looking at the LGBTQ world, the more we can continue to make it safe and promote Could ask your ERG if there are other out trans people that would be willing to speak to you. I love that idea, Chris. Thank you so much. Awesome. Yep, I think everyone's on their own timeline when it comes to coming out. Chris, they have a wonderful resource at Mass Mutual who does consulting, who did a workshop last night. So Megan will connect you, or reaching out for a trans folks group. This is awesome. You folks are so generous with each other and giving your great ideas. So just wanted to say, I have a free quick guide on my website that is on optimism, resilience, and grit. So if you want a few more tips or ways to apply this stuff, this is the website. I'll throw the link right in the chat, totally for free. And then I also have a digital course. I've been teaching this workshop for 8 or 9 years to many organizations. Once the pandemic hit 20 years ago, ladies and gentlemen, and everybody, I think I say ladies and gentlemen because I think that's a habit. So I'm working on changing that. Folks, I have a new digital course. It's on this exact topic. It takes about 3 hours because I was getting asked to do this workshop close to 4 days a week. Businesses, leaders, organizations were just not knowing where to turn when we were all in that state of ambiguity. Many of us still are with the pandemic. And because there were so many people who wanted this learning, but maybe weren't working for the companies I was leading the workshop for, I built a digital course. So that's available. The link's also in the chat here. We have 4 minutes left, boys and girls and ladies and gentlemen and everyone. Folks, I would love to stay connected. So here's a link to my LinkedIn. As I mentioned, I have a newsletter that comes out every single month. And I love to meet new people and stay connected. It's been an honor to be your guide in this past hour. I wish you all the best as we move into the fall season. And I just want to say thank you. What an honor it has been to be here. Thanks, everybody.